Hey pillars, and welcome back to another cycling video. Today I'm going to let you in on a little secret that will make your bike chain last a lot longer and keep it running smoothly. Waxing. Now I know what you're thinking.
Oil is fine for lubricating my bike chain. I don't need any fancy wax. This guy wants me to waste my money.
But here's the thing. Oil has its downsides. It's prone to attracting dirt and grime while out riding. That can create a buildup of gunk on your bike chain, and let me tell you, that gunk is a real pain to clean off. But wax is actually very different. When you wax your bike chain, you're providing an extra layer of protection against dirt and grime. The wax forms a barrier that helps keep your chain clean and smooth, and unlike oil, wax doesn't attract dirt and grime, so it stays cleaner for longer. It's like putting a protective shield on your bike chain, which at the end of the day is something good to have. But that's not all. Wax-based lubricants also tend to last longer than oil-based lubricants, so you don't have to reapply them as often. This can save you a lot of time and money in the long run, and wax-based lubricants are typically biodegradable and more environmentally friendly than oil-based lubricants. It's a win-win situation. Now, before I show the process of waxing your chain, I want to highlight that you can use any wax-based lube that is available to you. Now, living in Turkey, my options were limited, and I decided to go with Squirt Lube, but other brands are fine. Now, in this video, I won't be talking about any waxing with slow cookers. I remember I saw this years ago when I was a junior, and I just knew how hard it is to set everything up, and it's time consuming and just a big mess. So using a wax-based drip lube is probably your best bet, especially if you don't have the extra space or a backyard or a garage. It's just easy, no faff, just simple wax. Now, I unfortunately went down the rabbit hole of waxing your chain, and I watched a variety of lubes being tested, and some tests actually showed wax not being good, but it was in a controlled manner, meaning it was done not in actual riding conditions. It was more just in a lab tested. So I wanted to give you guys some more insight. So wax-based lubricants are generally considered to be more effective at reducing friction over the long run compared to oil-based lubricants for a few reasons. First, waxes are solid at room temperature, so they're less likely to be absorbed by the skin or other materials. Now, this means that it can create a longer lasting barrier between surfaces that are moving against one another, which can help reduce friction and wear. Second, waxes are often more viscous than oils, which means they are better able to fill in the gaps between surfaces and create a smoother, more even surface. Now, this can help also reduce friction and wear. Finally, waxes are typically more durable than oils, so they are less likely to break down and become ineffective over time. In a controlled situation where you're not going to be riding in the real world where there's dirt and grime, then an oil-based lube is way more efficient than a wax-based lube in the short term. But as soon as you start riding and you have your chain interacting with that grit and that dirt, the oil-based lube will just get so dirty a lot faster, and the efficiency of friction will decrease, where the wax-based will actually increase because it's counteracting and creating a barrier that won't allow grit and grime to get into that chain. All in all, wax just makes more sense. It's just the initial setup that is not going to be as efficient as oil-based lube, and the initial setup of actually getting your chain waxed in the first place. Now, to make this section of the video actually took me personal time, because I was trying to do this myself a couple weeks ago, and it is, how are you going to degrease your chain? So there's two main chemicals, and depending where you are living, I actually learned that some chemicals are banned. I found that out myself, and it is hard to find these brands. So we have mineral turpentine and also mineral spirits. So the mineral turpentine is actually used to take off any grease that's on your chain, whether that's factory brand new chain, it still has factory grease, so you have to get rid of that. And if you want to use a current chain that has grease on it, you have to strip it. So mineral turpentine will do that, and then you have mineral spirits, and that is to take off the film or residue that the mineral turpentine will leave. So it's a really interesting process because it has to be done, step by step. Now, it's important that you do try to look for a similar solvent as turpentine. Now, on the internet, it says you can use paint thinners, but I guess it depends, and I don't want to get into the chemicals. So just for simplicity, try to find a solvent that is labeled turpentine, which I was able to find in Turkey, thankfully. Like I said, you can use paint thinner, but I can't confirm 100%, as I guess different paint thinners have different compounds. And then basically the mineral spirits is used to take off that solvent. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find mineral spirits in Turkey, and I was reading blogs to see what people used instead. And basically mineral spirits is a denatured alcohol, and that's actually banned in some places. So they also refer to it as methylated spirits, which I wasn't able to find. It's just very, very concentrated alcohol. So basically I was able to use isopropyl alcohol. Now, I guess depending on where you live, isopropyl alcohol could be expensive. For me, it was relatively cheap here, so that's why I used to actually get rid of the residue that my turpentine was going to leave on my brand new chain, and it really worked in combination. So like I said, if you can't find mineral turpentine or mineral spirits, then go for something that's labeled turpentine and it has isopropyl alcohol in wherever you are. That's like the solution I figured out. Now, the wax-based lube I ordered was from Squirt. Now, like I was saying, in Turkey, the cycling scene's pretty big, but not compared to, North America or Europe. So I couldn't really find other examples. This was on Amazon. It came from the Netherlands, but there's other brands like Silka, and I'm pretty sure Smooth as well. So depending on what lube is available, just get yourself a wax-based lube, and I'm pretty sure it's readily available wherever you live. So pick up a bottle. This should last a long time. I wanted to get the biggest lube bottle because I had to pay import fees, and if I'm going to use this for a while, then I wanted the biggest option. Now I'm going to explain how you take a brand new chain and set it up for wax-based lube, but this would also work for a chain that's already been used. But in my situation, I just basically used my current lube along with my chain, made sure it was worn out, and then I replaced it. So I was basically waiting for this opportunity. Now you're going to take the brand new chain. It does have factory grease on it, and you will take it out of the packaging. Now you have to fill up a container or any basically Tupperware that you have with turpentine, and you will put your chain in it overnight, and you will allow it to soak overnight. Now, we don't have any ultrasonic cleaners that's going to agitate the turpentine with your chain, so you can just give it a shake. Very easy, very simple, very practical to do, and you will do that basically 2 times. So you'll pour out the old turpentine, and if it still needs to get that grease off of it, then you're going to let it sit overnight again. But also, if you did it for 6 hours, it doesn't have to be a full overnight thing, but for me, it's just easy to set up overnight because you're going to sleep anyways. Now, once your chain has gone through several turpentine treatments, at least 2, you should be able to take it out, and there shouldn't be any residue of grease on it. Whether it's an old chain or a new chain, it should feel not as greasy as it was before, but it will have some residue from the turpentine. So now we have to treat it with methylated spirits or isopropyl alcohol or denatured alcohol, whichever you have. So in my situation, I put it in isopropyl alcohol and I shaked it until the liquid is completely clear. I had to do it 2 times. So basically each process I did twice. And basically once you take it out, it should be just dry to the touch. It should have no film or residue from the turpentine or the original grease. And then you will allow it to hang dry for 3 hours. Unless you have a compressor, I just let mine hang dry overnight, and the next morning it was completely dry. Now, once your chain has dried, comes the fun part. You're going to take your brand new chain that has no grease on it, and you're going to bring it over to your bike. But there is a step that I should mention when doing this. I suggest that you make sure you fully degrease the chain rings, cassette, and jockey wheels to make sure you don't contaminate the newly waxed chain when switching it from a typical lube to a wax lube. Meaning, just because I have a brand new chain in my situation and it is going to be stripped of grease doesn't mean there isn't contaminants from my jockey wheels, from my cassette, and from my chain ring. So I actually took it to the local gas station and I cleaned it, I bike washed it, and made sure to use degreaser on those components and let it dry. So basically I was working with a very freshly controlled group set, and it was a really good process when putting on the new chain. Now here's a pro tip when applying wax-based drip lube to ensure that the wax actually gets into the pins properly. So the first thing you want to do is actually take your Squirt lube or whatever you're using, whatever wax-based lube, and you want to get hot water, room temperature, slightly higher than room temperature, and let the wax actually melt. So you can see on screen, I did that process. And once that actually happens, your lube is ready to be applied. Now the next big hack that you have to do when applying your wax-based lube that you just heated up is called the cross chain method, which means big ring on the front and then biggest cog at the back. And what that actually does, it opens up the pins because it is cross chaining, which means there's a lot of tension. So it'll open up those pins and you can apply the lube and it'll get into all the crevices of the chain. Now what I like to do once I apply a full rotation on the chain of wax-based lube, then I like to spin it and go up the cog at the back and down, and it actually gives a little bit of a coating to the whole cassette, which is going to be good for when you're actually riding. And then I like to do the opposite once I let it dry. So I do that whole process, I let it dry, and then I'm going to come back 3 hours, 4 hours later, and I'm going to do the reverse cross chain, meaning put it in the smaller inner ring and then the lowest cog at the back of the cassette. I'm going to reapply my lube and then go up and down and leave it in that cross chain method, just because it really helps open it and allows all the wax to get into the crevices. So why I find that so important, because if you're not going to go to the lengths of using a crock pot and waxing your lube and waxing your chain in the lube and doing that whole process, then this ensures the best way possible, if you are heating up your wax and you're doing the cross chain method, to actually make sure that all that wax actually gets in between the links. And I would say that if you do this step, which not a lot of people are talking about, then you can increase that initial efficiency and help reduce any friction that can be caused. Because if you just apply it, it might not get to all the crevices. It takes a while for the lube, the wax-based lube, to actually do its thing compared to an oil-based lube. So I think that step is very much overlooked, and I think it is a pro tip. Now you might be asking, how long does the wax last in terms of when is the next time you actually have to wax your chain? And I would say, depending on the conditions you're riding, whether it's wet or whether it's dry, or just how much you are riding per day, it's about 150 kilometers from the time that you lube your chain. So after a long ride, give or take, if you do 2 back-to-back, centuries, metric centuries, then yeah, you have to wax your chain. So you can usually start to feel when it gets to dry, but I will give you some tips of how to actually reapply it, because now that the wax is on the chain, there is a step that you can do to ensure the efficiency of it. So reapplying the wax on your chain is pretty simple. The first thing you want to do is take your bike chain and just get a dry rag or old t-shirt and just take it across bike chain and take any of that grit that built up, but it's actually the wax that built up with that grit, so it doesn't actually go onto the chain, which is so nice. Like, naturally it flakes, but it's just a nice thing to rub it down before applying a new set of wax. And just ensure that you really don't allow any leftover dirt and grime, because it will interfere from the new wax being applied. Now, if you are doing it, I do suggest heating it up, depending if it actually starts to get clumpy. Heating up doesn't take that long, so heat this up really quick and then you're ready to apply. I would say doing the cross chain method, so basically everything's the same since the initial setup, so do that again and it should be fine. But I don't think you have to do it 2 times. I think 1 time's more than enough, and I would just do it in the big ring in the front and then the biggest cog at the back. And that's basically it. With regular waxing, your bike chain will stay clean and smooth, and you'll be able to enjoy your rides for a lot longer. So the next time you're thinking about lubricating your bike chain, if you are still team oil-based lubes, consider waxing instead. The fact that I come back from a ride and I can touch my chain and it isn't dirty on my fingers, it's not dirty on my clothes, and it just looks so much better overall, I think it's a no-brainer that going forward, I will always use wax-based lubes on my chain. And one thing I want to note is, if you ever run out of wax-based lube, do not put any oil-based lubes onto your chain, because that messes up the whole process and you're going to have to redo it all over again. So you don't really need to degrease your chain. You don't have to use a degreaser on your chain. Like, it has wax as the coating, so it's basically just using a dry cloth or an old rag, take off that surface dirt and apply new wax. Very simple. Never use, if you get out of this, you can't use oil-based lubes. So only wax lubes, and different wax-based lubes use different components. So try to stick to the same one and don't use a degreaser on your chain. And just leave it very simple. It's simple now. Now, if you did learn something interesting from this video and will consider doing it in your own cycling practice, then all I suggest is you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, comment what you want to know more about waxing your chain. I'll probably do follow-up videos, especially my first initial impression. But even though I've already, spoiler alert, I've already ridden today with it and it was by far a great experience, I will be doing more in-depth videos. So stay tuned for that. I hope you guys did enjoy the video, and until the next one, keep on pedaling.